Hello, Two Forks Tower. This is Cissy Jones, voice of Delilah from Firewatch, and you are listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Welcome welcome all to episode 128 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded on Sunday, April 24th, 2022. I am your host, Luke Lore, the Insipid Ghost. In this episode, we're joined by Dan Stapleton, executive editor of reviews for IGN, on to discuss how IGN goes about reviewing games and the challenges of navigating that space from ad revenues to the mythical paid reviews. Prior to that, we're chatting the latest information on Xbox console sales. Amy Hennig has a new Star Wars project, and Ubisoft has an NFT problem. Enjoy. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I am wont to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness are headed to the podcast Midweek Mix-Up. The guys over there, including Wandering Dutch, Boxenberger, Xbox Mick, they were super cool in inviting me on, giving me a chance to chat about Xbox during the day in a rare day appearance for me. Given that I was on spring break this past week and had some time off, I was able to join some of the daytime podcasts, and that was an absolute blast to hang out with them, chat with them, and engage with their audience. I had a fantastic time, guys, and I really appreciate you all having me on. Definitely a boost to my gaming week. Now, apart from that, we've got a little bit of housekeeping before we get to the news. Later on in the episode, I'm going to be talking about Godfall. I have been playing the game. I was given a review copy of the game provided by Gearbox, and when I get a review copy, if I have the means, I like to pass that review kind of goodness that I get, the chance to play a free game, as it were, on to you guys. And so if you're interested in playing Godfall after hearing my thoughts about it, drop your gamer tag into the comment section on YouTube, and I will enter you into a little RNG kind of prize pool thing to see if I can't give away a copy purchased of my own money. So that way, you know, I'm getting to spread the love around. So if you're interested in Godfall, drop your gamer tag into the YouTube reviews, and I will take good care of you guys there for sure. Now, plenty of news this week before we chat with Dan Stapleton, and I want to dive right into it. The first news story comes from kind of a Twitter exchange between VGChartz, which does some tracking of console sales, and they do it based on guesstimates. There's a bit of controversy in it, but in announcing and making a bold statement about Xbox console sales, several Xbox executives and employees came out seemingly in support of the news. And this is a complicated issue. Well, I suppose it's not very complicated, but it's layered. It's complex in some ways. So for context, VGChartz is a site that uses aggregate data. They use NPD data and a couple other sources, and they make kind of logical estimates as to kind of where console sales would be based on various projections and the data that they do get. They have a spotty track record of being accurate, so much so that Xbox has kind of shrugged them off in years past, and several journalists have as well. In recent years, VGChart's record has improved. They kind of cleaned up the way they do aggregate data. They've shown more information as far as how they get some of that information, and they've been more accurate of late, according to other various journalists. I should note. Now, what's interesting about it is they came out this past week and said, or showed a comparison rather, between Xbox 360 sales after 17 months and Xbox Series S and X sales after 17 months. And at 17 months' time, the Xbox 360 was at 9.38 million units sold, according to VGChartz. Whereas at 17 months now, the Xbox Series X and S are at 13.87 million units sold, meaning that the Series S and X are ahead of where Xbox 360 was by almost 4.5 million units. Now, that's impressive on a number of levels. It bodes very well for this generation, in which console sales are a barometer, but I don't think they're the barometer. I think engagement is really the barometer level. But to see that the Series S and X are outselling and outpacing the Xbox 360 by 4.5 million is pretty impressive, all things considered. And we're lended credence to these numbers by the fact that Aaron Greenberg quote tweeted it and stated, quote, thanks to all the people who have helped support the growth and adoption of Xbox so far this generation. Lots of work ahead, and hopefully supply continues to improve globally as well. End quote. Now, this adds validity to the idea that if the numbers aren't at least close to accurate, at the very least, Xbox is doing well and improving upon where they were with the Xbox 360 times. That would have to be a marketable improvement over where the Xbox One was. Um, at that time in the Xbox One era, we were not getting data on how many units sold that was truly. If you go into the VGChartz website and kind of look at this data, show it has a graph and it shows where the Xbox Series S and X are versus the 360. And in all things considered, the Series S and X are trending far upward and at a higher rate upwards than the Xbox 360 was. Now, the question of how you should interpret this data and whether or not it's relevant to you is a layered conversation, right? You should not truly care about console sales data in the big sense of the word, because if you've got the console you're having fun with, that's where you should be playing, and it shouldn't bother you whether or not it sells more units, less units than any other competitor or than previous previous iterations of that box. The counterpoint to that logically would be, hey, if my box is doing well, the one that I enjoy is doing well, I'm going to get more content for it. By all means, we're seeing no signs that content's going to slow down for any of the consoles. In fact, pandemic or otherwise, it seems very much that video games are in vogue, and the money is there, and that's where people are flocking to create content. I mean, not just in the gaming space, but like think about the podcasting gaming space. There's a new podcast every 2 minutes, right? People are like, "Oh, I'm doing an Xbox podcast," and it's just popping up here and there. Everyone's doing one now. I'm doing a PlayStation podcast. That's a good sign for our industry. It is getting a little saturated, I would think, but I mean, who's to say, right? Like that's a opinion question. You got to find your audience where you can. What's interesting, I think, to me is that for VGChartz to have multiple people, including Aaron Greenberg and Josh Muncy, come out and quote tweet and talk about this data gives you the idea that, okay, Xbox is in a very good place in terms of unit sales. We know that Game Pass numbers are doing well, a little over 25 million there. I still thought it would be higher, but still, that's a pretty impressive number, all things considered. And to see that they've gotten over 13 million consoles out to people is pretty darn cool. Like that, to me, is exciting, given the global chip shortages that are going on. And knowing that they're becoming more prolific and more findable is a good sign as well. I'm curious to see if that slows down at all as the chip shortage is understood by people and they're cutting deals left and right. And as we watch the first party portfolios truly flesh out into this generation. Consistently, I want to call the Series S and X and the PlayStation 5 next gen, which it's not. It's this generation now. But this blended element of releases is truly odd. But I am looking forward to, as the consoles become more available, I'm looking forward to leaving the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 behind. I think they are now holding back games in a way that perhaps they wouldn't before. Years ago, that was a conversation, is this version going to hold back that version? And I think it was a little bit of a mixed bag. It's not an apples to apples, oranges to oranges type discussion because of the way games are made on the PC space kind of thing. But now I think it's pretty clear that 2013 hardware is going to hold back 2020 hardware, right? Like, I think that's a fair point. Nonetheless, it's exciting to see that this information is going out there and that people are commenting on it on an official channel. Like, that's kind of neat to see for sure. I do wish that Xbox would just be clear and transparent about their sales numbers, but I understand why they wouldn't be. Still, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Let's see. Next up on our news list here, Amy Hennig has a new Star Wars project, and that's exciting for a couple different reasons for sure. But Amy Hennig kind of being welcomed back into the Star Wars space is good news, given that her last projects have been wiped clean, gone. 1313, Project Ragtag, those Star Wars games are gone, and it's kind of a bummer to know that all that work was scrapped. You have to imagine that her next project being made with Skydance is a spiritual successor in some way, shape, or form to that game that she was working on, that kind of Uncharted-esque Star Wars project. For me, I'm very excited to see what happens with this one. I want more Star Wars games. As of right now, we know of 8 Star Wars games officially in development. You have Project Eclipse, which is with, oh my gosh, the PlayStation developer that made not Too Human. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on it. But they're making Star Wars Eclipse, which is that kind of like story-driven game with the troubled PlayStation studio, the one that had some allegations against it. You got the KOTOR remake with Asper Media. You got Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment's open world Star Wars game. You got Star Wars Hunters over on the Switch. You've got Jedi Fallen Order 2, which I think is coming this year, guys. Yeah, EA is working on a first-person shooter. There's an EA strategy game that's been announced. And then, of course, Amy Hennig's new action-adventure title. So 8 Star Wars games in development. No sign of a Rogue Squadron. Very upset by that, by the way. But that's exciting to me. I loved when Star Wars games were coming out left and right and you could dive into different ones. Like there were some that I skipped and some that I didn't. I think it's a good thing. Some people would worry about market saturation, but I feel like Star Wars is in an interesting and good, healthy space in terms of production. You've got Obi-Wan later this month. You've got these 8 Star Wars games in development there. You had the very successful Mandalorian series. You have the pretty darn successful Boba Fett series, which had a great second half of its season. You got Ahsoka coming out. You got the Acolyte. I'm loving this idea of more Star Wars. I did just buy a Jedi costume for Star Wars Week, but I'm super stoked for that. I'm really excited to see what happens at the Star Wars celebration, right? Like in May, we're supposed to see another few Star Wars games shown. We know about 8 of them. I have a hunch, I should say. Rumors are rumors, right? That you're going to see another Star Wars game in May, which is really exciting. And I'm just fingers crossed that one of them is a Rogue Squadron or Asper Media remakes Rogue Squadron, because I really want that game to be available. I'm loving, excuse the yawn, mid-podcast, so unprofessional, and I didn't even pause it. I'm really loving the Lego Star Wars games where or levels where you fly around as a ship. That's my favorite part. I did a little Dash Rendar, Shadows of the Empire bit. I've been playing different levels like their Rogue Squadron, but I want that full-on Hoth level in Rogue Squadron. I want those full-on Death Star battles from Rogue Squadron. I want that. Those are the best. Those are the absolute best for sure. So, yeah. Bravo to that. More Amy Hennig in Star Wars is good. I will say Amy Hennig, like Jade Raymond, has a lot of weight behind her name, but I worry about the games that haven't shipped, right? Like haven't shipped a game in a long time. And so I want to see kind of the product come to fruition here, because we've been screwed out of their goodness too many times. It's time to see what's going on. Next up, Ubisoft announced Project Q. And this was hilarious and sad and frustrating on a couple different levels. So Ubisoft announced Project Q, which is a new game in the PvP space that is not a battle royale, but it looks like one. It's a team battle arena that lets you truly own your experience. And the game is in early development, and you can register to sign up. Truly own your experience. That sounds like NFTs, doesn't it? And given Ubisoft's kind of run with Project Quartz and how that backfired, and they're canceled Tom Clancy games. I think it was Ghost Recon Frontlines, and then they had one other that was canceled, and then they took off the Tom Clancy branding on one of their kind of arena shooters as well. Project Q is in for a lot of road bumps, that's for sure. Their social media team was adamant on Twitter that they are not planning to put NFTs into this game. They were also clear that it is not a battle royale. Okay. It looks like Battle Royale. It looks like Fortnite, and it's hard to trust Ubisoft at this point, given that they've been trying multiple business tactics to monetize elements of a game that have been excessive, right? Like they had those XP boosters at one point. They've done lots of expansions for their games, which I do not mind expansions one bit. Microtransactions have been proliferant, and then they had the courts that they tried to drop into to Ghostwire, not Ghostwire. What is it? Ghost Recon. Oh, whatever. Breakpoint. That's what it was. Kind of so forgettable was Breakpoint. So it's hard to trust Ubisoft at this point. Now, interestingly, Ubisoft is combating takeover. Multiple companies are looking to be purchasing Ubisoft, and there are signs that are showing that Ubisoft is kind of in the mix for people to be acquiring them. Private investor groups are looking to pick them up as well because they're in financial trouble. it's a mixed bag if you're Ubisoft, right? Because anyone that picks them up is going to get that amazing set of IP that they have. The Assassin's Creed name alone prints money. Tom Clancy prints money. Even with a frustrating few years of releases, those names alone are huge. But you've also got a lot of turmoil on the developer side, mismanagement of and mistreatment of employees. Yves Guillemot doesn't have a successor. There's a lot of elements here that are troubled. And the logical question being on an Xbox show is, would Ubisoft be a good pickup for Microsoft? And Todd Oxer wrote in with a question that I think is adjacent to this. With Ubisoft games coming to Game Pass and no update on Ubisoft Plus on console, we see a reduction of third-party subscriptions. Okay, so we're going to put a pin in Todd's question, but we're going to loop back to it. The logical question that people have been asking is would Microsoft kind of go for Ubisoft? It would be a good marriage in some ways because you'd pick up the Tom Clancy brand, you'd pick up Assassin's Creed, you get some very talented studios in there. You also pick up a lot of baggage, and that's baggage that they've got in already with this Activision pickup, right? Like the mistreatment of employees and the mishandling of projects is something they're gonna have to do a lot of cleanup on as soon as they get the Activision deal done. And they can't even comment on the Activision stuff. And if they were to pursue Ubisoft as well, I would have to think, though I'm not a lawyer nor an expert, I would have to think that would further complicate the questions of monopolization. The idea that they're going after another publisher. They snagged Bethesda, publisher. Although I think of them as developers, publisher. They're snagging Activision. To snag Ubisoft as well, oh boy, right? Oh boy, that's a big ask. The other idea is like, would they go to Sony? Would they go to 2K? Would Tencent be interested? Would Embracer Group, who continues to gobble up AA studios, be interested? I don't know, right? I don't know. This one, the only one I really want Microsoft to get is WB. And even then, they wouldn't get the IP, so it's hard. I just think WB Montreal and Rocksteady are the two like wins. Oh, NetherRealm as well. But with Ubisoft, it's a mixed bag, because they've been so bogged down with these monetization models that it belays and betrays some of the talent that come with their studios. So I'm not sure there which one or how I feel about it. Now, to loop this into Todd's question, if you missed it, we're getting Assassin's Creed Origins and another Ubisoft title. I think it's For Honor coming to Game Pass officially. Maybe it's not For Honor. I can't remember. But they're kind of looping into Game Pass, some of these Ubisoft games. And Ubi has never, ever shied away from putting things on different and multiple consoles. They supported the Wii U at launch. They'll support any system at launch. They'll put their games any and everywhere. But it's the first time these are truly coming to Game Pass, and that's exciting in some ways. They've supported games with gold multiple times over, but it also begs the question of what's going to go on with Ubisoft Plus, their subscription service. And Todd's question is, will we see third-party subscriptions die out and fade away? And that's a complex issue, but I think the answer is going to be yes in some cases. Because, like, would you have wanted a Bethesda subscription? Would you have wanted an Activision subscription? Would you want a Ubisoft or a 2K subscription? Grand Theft Auto's getting one, right? Like, would you pay a yearly fee to play the new Assassin's Creed? I don't know. One of the nice things about Game Pass, and to a different extent, but similar to PlayStation Plus's now tiered system, is you get variety, right? But if you're subscribing to a publisher that doesn't do much in the way of variety, like a lot of Ubisoft games are formulaic, and anyone that's frustrated by that, what they would call a tired argument, there's a lot of signposts that show how those games are formulaic. Would people want a subscription service to know what they're getting every year? Some would say yes, absolutely. I love me a good Ubisoft clear the map game, but is it a different experience, or can I wait for that to be on sale? Those are questions that you can kind of pose to yourself. But I think you will see a reduction in third-party subscriptions. I also think, and Netflix is my indicator here, that subscription services are becoming bloated, and they need to be cautious to not overinflate themselves, and to be very wary of market trends. Is it wise to be modeling everything after a subscription service, or should you just participate in ones that are pre-existing? And that's a question, man, because Netflix is losing people left and right on the video side. in large part due to rising prices and content that people aren't asking for and canceling things that they are asking for. But they've got metrics on that one, and metrics and narrative don't always line up, right? But I do think you're going to see a reduction in third-party subscriptions, Todd. I just don't know how you wouldn't at this point. There's too many. And I think people are getting wise to the fact that their time is what's really at stake here. It's not a matter of good and bad content. It's a matter of time. I don't have time to play so many things. That doesn't stop me from buying games on sale, though. That's for sure. All right, one more thing I want to talk about before we kind of move on and talk and chat Godfall and then go to our interview with Dan. And that's Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite's roadmap for Season 2 has been released. It's got some good stuff on it, and it's got some hugely frustrating things on it. So, on the good side, Season 2 is launching on May 3rd. Season 2 is going to include Forge, but that's coming in August. Season 2 is going to have more content, a more complete battle pass. It's going to have a number of different events going on with it, kind of an expanded and better version of what you got this time with Fractures. The first Fracture event is going to be the last week in May. It's called Entrenched. They are going to have campaign co-op starting and targeting late August. Season 2 is going to last for 6 months. 6 months, and there'll be earnable credits in the system as well. 2 new maps, some new modes in there. Oh man, it's hard, man. And being a Halo fan is strange these days because we're getting more and better Halo than we've had in the last 7 years, right? 2 years ago we didn't even have Halo Infinite. The Master Chief Collection is doing very well. You got a Halo show, which bringing in non-Halo fans, which, by the way, episode 5 of the Halo show, very good. It felt like Halo. It's a good sign. We'll see if it pays off because episode 2, man, that was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. But the others have been fine. Episode 5 is good. So yeah, this season 2 of Infinite, man, it really bothers me that it's 6 months. That is a huge red flag. It's so damn frustrating. Pardon my language to those of you who have kids in the car, but it's so frustrating. Season 2 is 6 months. That means there will be 2 seasons across the first year of this multiplayer life cycle. I love that Forge is going to be included for those that are interested. It's going to be an open beta. I love that they're getting campaign co-op in there. That's happening in late August, theoretically. But man, 6 months. 6 months for season 2. That bothers the mess out of me. For all the goodness they do, they're just so slow in producing content. And Joseph Staten's quote says, "We know we need to deliver more content and more features quickly. Staying true to priority 0 means that we sometimes need to slow down in order to stay healthy and move faster later. But we're also aggressively looking for ways to accelerate." End quote. Priority 0 is not burning out his team. That was one of Staten's things when he came in. And I applaud that in a world where we've got crunch problems and issues and you want to make Microsoft an inviting place for people to work. That's good. It's still too slow. And that's not excusable at this point. You released a game during a pandemic, excused. Delayed it for a year, excused. The campaign, pretty great gameplay, all excused. Great. Love that. But 6 months for season 2 is a huge red flag. The quote that says we're aggressively looking for ways to accelerate, I think this points to expanding team size, bringing in multiple teams to have a rotating set of features similar to how Sea of Thieves does it. That's good, right? You want that. How has that not already been in place, though? Right? And I'm speculating, but how has that not already been happening? Certain Affinity is making that Battle Royale Light mode, which I'm very excited about. That's confirmed. They're making Battle Royale Light. I'm so excited for it. But I want real Battle Royale. So I want to see what this Last Spartan Standing mode truly is. Love that they're strengthening ties with Certain Affinity. Want them to put a ring on it for sure. But man, it's just I just have so many mixed emotions here about what this does. But I love the gameplay in Halo Infinite. I'm very frustrated by the way they handle a number of things at this stage, right? I really thought season 2 would have been here earlier than they expected. And I thought for sure it wouldn't be 6 months long. It would have been 3 months, and that's how it should be. I better hope those events are good, and they really need to do something special because the game is incredible, and it would be a friggin' waste if they lose that gameplay out because they don't have enough content there. They should be aggressively expanding and accelerating 6 months ago, a year ago. Maybe they already are. Maybe we're just not hearing about it. Benefit of the doubt is there, but come on, man. Halo Infinite's got to be better. And by the end of this year, it better be elite. It better be elite in terms of the shooter space. That's for sure. All right, let's get to some quick questions here, and then we're going to talk about Godfall. First question came via email from Glyphere. What's up, dude? Appreciate you writing in. He says, long-time listener, first-time mailer. I've been following the show since episode 34. Dang, you're awesome. That's awesome. Episode 34, you rock, dude. He says, I love cast co-op. Oh, man, thank you. That means the world because I have to do that with Joseph Moran, and he's honestly the worst human being on this planet. Ainsley's cool, but, like Joe, ugh. So he's been listening since episode 34, loves cast co-op. His question is, now that Xbox has acquired Activision Blizzard, do you think Blur could be remade and made into a competing kart racer for Xbox? So when the Activision deal does finalize, which it's not yet, we're not expecting it to for some time. The idea of the studio Blur kind of being put together to make a game similar to Blur, I'm not quite sure. I'm not tracking that, but you bottom line, you want to know if they could make a kart racer. Yeah, absolutely. I think Xbox needs a good kart racer, and they need to take advantage of characters in their portfolio for sure. So yes, I think that would be a fantastic choice and a good use of the talent that Activision would bring in terms of that space. Toys for Bob and several of the people that worked on Crash Team Racing would love that. Would love that. That'd be a great pickup. Artur Gaming writes in and he says, is it fair to criticize a game for being too long? I'm enjoying Weird West, but it's daunting that it is so long. Enjoy a nice 10-hour single-player campaign sometimes. Artur, absolutely agree. Yes, you can criticize a game for being too long. I would criticize Dying Light 2's primary crit path story for being way too long and way too wordy for a game that's about hacking and slashing zombies. Absolutely, you can criticize games for being too long. I love me a good 10-hour campaign single player. That's a blast. What's my favorite is when you got a good 10-hour campaign and then you've got a healthy list of optional quests to do. I think a lot of games handle that very well. And that's awesome, right? Because if you love the game, you can get more out of it. But if you're content with a good 10-hour experience, that's the jam right there. Do that. So yeah, I love a good 10-hour game, and you absolutely should criticize games for being too long because sometimes they just are, right? And time is finite. Last question comes from Mr. Dash Revolver. What's up, Dash? We need to work together soon. He says, what are your thoughts on Matt Smith's tweet about Xbox Japan's growth? For context listeners, Matt Smith's tweet reads, quote, my team at Xbox Publishing here in Japan is growing. We're working with top-class developers on truly groundbreaking product for Xbox. DMs are open. Happy to answer questions, end quote. He goes on in subsequent tweets to list the different positions they're looking to fill. I think it's cool, Dash. I wouldn't overread into it. I think Matt is trying to sell the idea of getting people to come work for him in a space where people don't historically want to work with Xbox. I hope it's something great, right? I want it to be. We know that they've been courting Japanese developers for some time, but I wouldn't read too much into it. I did reach out to Matt and invite him onto the podcast to talk about his career in Xbox Publishing. He politely declined. So it's kind of a bummer we can't have him on, but at the same time, you gotta, that would make sense, right? For sure. All right, guys. Godfall. I am really enjoying Godfall. Did not think I would. Gearbox sent me over a code to check out at my request, thanks to some listeners who pushed me to check it out. I really like Godfall, right? This is weird, right? I think there was a lot of really heavy pushback when that game first came out and troubles when it first came out because it was a PlayStation 5 exclusive. They were using phrases like can only be run on a PlayStation 5. And it was a looter, but it wasn't a live service game, which is a bit of a misconception, including one held by me when I first began interviewing the team. It's not a live service game. It's a co-op looter that can be played in a confined space. I've been playing it a lot solo. It reminds me a lot of Outriders, if Outriders was melee based. Some really cool art, really cool weapons. It is a story that I'm not connecting with in any way, shape, or form, but I'm really enjoying the combat of. So put on a podcast, jumping into Godfall is a good time for me. Very clearly, though, the levels are designed to be played co-op and not a single player experience. And so far, I've only played single player. So I've had to do some grinding here and there. Bless you to my dog. I had to do some grinding here and there, which I've not really enjoyed the grind part, but the combat and the weapons and the art are super dope. Really fun. You get these little not these little. And then you get like super cool armor sets that you can unlock as you go. They remind me of javelins from Anthem, but they're really just armors, and they have little perk abilities here and there, like bleed effects, frost, but you don't really notice it, or at least I'm not so far. And I've cleared the first world, as it were, like the first big boss, and there's some Dark Souls style gameplay here and there, but you can just go through and mash buttons. You won't be as successful as unless you play it like reading the enemies. The problem is because it's meant to be played co-op, you don't get that one-on-one engagement that you would get in a Souls style game, despite some of the combat being based on dodging and parrying and meleeing and crit spots here and there. A lot of spell casting going on, some just beautiful particle effects throughout. I'm loving this game as what I would call a double A game, which may be offensive, and I don't mean for it to be, but I'm really enjoying aspects of it, right? There's a lot of fun to be had in this world. There's also a lot of problems that kind of take away from the experience. The Ultimate Edition is $40, and I feel like if you bought it at 30, like half the price of a full price game, then you'd be quite happy with your purchase. I would not sleep on Godfall if you like games like Outriders, Anthem, Avengers, uh, or melee button mashy games. Uh, those are kind of the mesh of what it is. It does a lot of things well and masters none of them, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So to me, this is a snag it if it's on sale and give it a shot kind of game. I remind you that I got a code from Gearbox, and I'm going to be purchasing one for a listener. If this sounds like something that you would love, like a good-looking, fun melee game to just throw a podcast on and grind some levels and have a good time, drop your gamer tag into the YouTube comments and throw a like and a subscribe while you're at it. Help share it out. Like help the podcast grow. Yeah, throw a like on it, or throw your gamer tag in there is what I mean to say. And I'll enter you into an RNG, and I'll pick a winner kind of midweek by Friday. We'll say by Friday. I'll pick a winner, and I'll send you a code purchased with my own money, because I like to pass that on when I'm fortunate enough to get one, because that's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? Oh man. Okay, so I want to send you guys to the interview with Dan Stapleton of IGN. Before I do, I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you haven't had a chance to share it out to anywhere that you think would like it, I would ask you guys to do so. And finding it in places that you think would be good fits. One of the things that Reddit doesn't allow you to do is promote your own work. But if you find like a snowboarding community that would be interested in the Shredders interview, or an Xbox fan site that you think would be interested in the fact that like Shredders is not going to have a sequel, but it's an Xbox exclusive game, and is it going to stay that way? And if you find people that are interested in the Cowabunga collection and want to hear Digital Clips interview, like, it means the world when you guys share it to those communities, because those are the people that check it out, right? And I'm struggling with finding people that are interested in the show, because when people find it, they seem to like it a lot, which is great, makes me feel good. But like, I'm not the best at promoting, if that makes sense. So if you find people that are jamming on it or be interested, please share it to them and let them know, because it means the world to me, right? It means the world to me for sure. All right, guys. So that's going to be it for me. Let's head you over to an interview with Dan Stapleton of IGN, talking about all the elements of the IGN review process, which I think is a complex and very fascinating issue. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Alrighty, guys, I'd like to welcome now to the show IGN's executive editor of reviews, Mr. Dan Stapleton. Dan, thank you for agreeing to be with me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Luke. Thanks for having me.
I'm ecstatic to get to talk to you. I have a number of things that I would love your insight on, given your extensive career in games as they pertain to the review process and kind of what it's like to work for an outlet like IGN, with the impact it can have on the gaming industry. But before we go into that, I would love for you to elaborate a little bit on your career. Your bio says you've been in games for 18 years. Is that up to date?
Sounds about right. I started at PC Gamer magazine in 2004. So, yeah.
2004. Now, did you always know you wanted to go into the gaming industry, or was that just a happenstance chance?
I mean, it was something I thought would be cool. I never realistically considered it was going to be a possibility that I could actually do. And I found an ad on Craigslist and got my foot in the door. I guess my first published review was actually with IGN. I had applied for a associate editor job. Didn't even get an interview, but at the time, the practice was to see if any of the people who applied for a job and didn't get it would want to write some free reviews. So I took them up on that. We don't do that anymore. I don't ask anybody to work for free.
Yeah, suddenly your inbox is flooded.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do get people offering to write reviews for free, but I don't want to do that for a number of reasons, including like just devaluing the work. I don't think that's fair to people that do this professionally. Not that people that want to do it for free are not up to the task or anything like that. But if I can't pay somebody for the work, I don't want to ask them to do it.
Sure.
Sorry, where were we on the question?
Well, your first foray was writing a free review after you didn't get called back for an interview.
That's right. So I had gotten one review published, and then I offered to do another one, or I took up another one. Didn't really know what I was doing on that one because it was a genre that was a game that looked like an RTS, but was more of a grognardy actual war game, and so I kind of reviewed it as an RTS, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not going to run this," and it's like, "Yeah, you made the right call there." But I did have one review published on IGN, and that helped me get my foot in the door at PC Gamer. So I got that job in, I guess it was April of 2004. Wow. That was pretty fresh out of college. I had a internship at a local newspaper for about 6 months before that.
And when you entered into kind of getting that first job, how different is the industry now to what it was then?
Well, that was a job in print journalism, which is a very different pace from online. Just radically different day to day. In those days, it would we were making a print publication, so you would have deadlines, but like the first couple of weeks of each cycle, each 4-week cycle, were kind of relaxed. You would do what you could, but most of it, you got to play a bunch of games. You got to go on trips to studios for previews. Would happen over the course of that cycle, and then toward the end of the month, like the last week, the production week was super busy. So it was kind of a regular cadence. Whereas with online, obviously, like everything happens all at once. At the moment something happens, you got to go. So it's just a much different pace of working. Also with a magazine, it's like you have a certain number of pages to fill, and once you've filled up those pages, you're all done. Like there's no more you can do. Whereas the internet is a bottomless pit of content that you can keep throwing work into, and it will never be satiated. So you have to kind of learn to decide when you've done enough.
Did you at all, and so I've had some of the old EGM guys on before. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Player One podcast, but those guys have been good enough to come over, and they've talked before about in the magazine space how important space itself actually is, and finding ways to get things onto the page in order to say what you want to say. Did you find any lessons from that element of the job carried over into kind of the digital realm?
Yeah, and to some degree. I mean, the layout, our tools are limited compared to what you could do in Adobe InDesign for laying out something on a page, just because of the way website CMS works. But we've gotten a little better about that. Like we've got our tools are getting better, just in terms of like you can do box outs and we've always been able to do large pull quote text, which I like to use just to break up the a great big wall of text. But yeah, and then just like the need to be concise when you don't necessarily have to, but I think it's better to get to the point pretty quickly rather than ramble on for 4 paragraphs before you get to whether the game you're talking about is good or bad. I think is a lesson that was drilled into me then, just to be efficient with space. But I think it's also just better to read. Like you don't want to have to read a long anecdote about what somebody had for breakfast that day before they start talking about what we're all here to discuss.
I think that's been the most interesting thing as an observer from the outside looking in, and from following IGN, listening to IGN podcasts and coverage from the 2006 era on through, is at one point it sounded like that. You heard about people's breakfast and reviews, or you heard about their own anecdotes and relationships to a game, and it's gone through various stages of development and how the readers and listeners consume it, and it really has evolved into a very different place. Is there a reason you guys wanted to get away from kind of those personal anecdotes? Was it a matter of space and efficiency?
Not in online. No, I think it's just a matter of style and what the current crop of people running it tend to enjoy, or what we think makes good reading.
Gotcha. Well, before I get too far away from your career, because I've got a number of questions about a lot of what you brought up, but you ended up being folded into IGN in 2013 and have been there since. How long have you been in the executive editor of reviews role?
That since day one there, basically. Well, not quite day one, but close. I've been doing this same role, basically. Well, not exactly the same role, but similar role for 9 years, 8 years, because the one year that I've been with IGN as a company was as editor-in-chief of GameSpy.
Mm-hmm.
Before that was shut down, and I was folded in.
Goodness. So you have 9.
The role has changed in that initially I was just overseeing games, and now I directly oversee games. Myself and my deputy editor Tom Marks largely oversee games, but I also oversee people who run our movie and TV coverage and our tech review coverage.
Gotcha. So far beyond just the gaming aspect of it, then.
Right. I mean, like I said, I'm like directly overseeing games much more than I am movies and TV, but I supervise those people.
That sounds like a big job, and one that potentially has a lot of influence on and impact on readers when you look at the audience size of IGN. Do you ever feel pressure knowing how many people are potentially impacted on the industry side, or are definitely going to be impacted on the people that are consuming it, people that are reading reviews, listening to content, that kind of stuff?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Like that's a responsibility to be fair and honest. I don't feel I make a point of not trying to take into account like what will a negative review mean for the people that made this, because like they already have a group of people that are paid to worry about that. They're marketing and advertising people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that are trying to sell something. Regardless of what they personally think about it. That's not the role of a critic. A critic is supposed to give you they're supposed to be impartial in that we have no business interest in business or personal interest in seeing a certain game succeed or fail.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the entire point of the role. So I do feel a lot of pressure to maintain that sense of impartiality,
Mm-hmm.
but not to try to ensure something is successful.
Has your view on kind of the ethics of the industry and your role there changed over the 9 years, given that you do have to keep that impartiality element while also working for a company that needs ad revenue and spacing on the page, that kind of stuff?
No, I think that's been pretty consistent. I mean, like that's why you get into a job like reviewing video games, right? You don't do that if you want to be a marketer, right? That is, I don't want to say it's an easier job. I've never done it, so I don't know exactly, but that's a that you don't have to have any personal credibility to do it, I guess, or personal sense of credibility. You're out there trying to move product, and you'll say whatever you have to say to get it done. So it's just different.
Gotcha. I think oftentimes people will intermix the two, kind of forgetting the two roles can be separate from one another.
Yeah,
sure.
there's definitely vocal fanboys on the internet who are very upset when a critic doesn't like something that they like, and and they will, try and assign blame to them for that thing succeeding or failing, that thing that they like, which is, there's some impact of good and bad reviews on sales. Like that's kind of the point. But anecdotally, it hasn't been I can't point to a game where I'm like, oh, that game succeeded because of good reviews, or that game failed because of bad reviews. Like there are way too many counterexamples where a game that got great reviews failed, or a game that got terrible reviews succeeded, or
Certainly
mediocre reviews. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and oftentimes we forget that the reviewer is indeed writing their review, giving their opinion, which is a constant source of amusement in terms of discussion and watching reviewers. So much so that your Twitter header is the definition of opinion.
Right. Yeah. People don't. I don't want to overgeneralize, but there are definitely a lot of people who don't understand the concept of what a review is. They think it is like a scientific process where you're supposed to be objective as opposed to impartial. And reviewing a game or a movie or TV show or book or song or any form of art is art criticism, and art can't be objectively quantified. Just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So there's no and as many people have tried over the decades that we've been reviewing video games, there's no way to come up with a system that's going to accurately reflect the opinions of everybody, because a lot of people have diametrically opposed opinions on how good games are. So how can one review reflect both of those?
In that realm, in that idea, you certainly have to create a system. You guys have the number system at IGN, and it's gone through different variations, 10-point scale, 5-point scale, 1-point scale, that kind of stuff, through the course of its, I guess, existence. When you bring on a new reviewer, do you have to run them through, I would imagine you run them through a number of different things, from kind of ethics training to also familiarizing themselves with what a score means at IGN. Am I overgeneralizing or over assuming in that realm?
No, I mean, we have our score definitions page that I ask everybody to read over when they're writing a review for us, whether it's a staff member who's been here for a long time, or just somebody who's writing their first freelance review for us. And that just goes over the word definitions of each of these scores. Because like the numbers, I like to point out to people, it's not math. Like even though it's a number, but it's not math. It's more of a code. Like these numbers they're sequential, but an 8 is not twice as good as a 4, right? It's adding and subtracting these things doesn't do anything, because the numbers just represent words. For example, on our scale, a 10 is a masterpiece, a 9 is amazing, an 8 is great, a 7 is good, a 6 is okay, 5 is mediocre, 4 is bad, 3 is awful, 2 is painful, 1 is disaster. So, not everybody has them memorized like I do, but every time we give a score or give a review, like the word that corresponds to that score is next to it in great big letters.
It would seem to me that it is a big misunderstanding for a lot of people throughout, that they want it to be math, or they want it to be objective in terms of a process. Graphics are this, music is this, and assigning a numerical value to it and then creating an average was a practice that even some magazines used to do and other outlets have done before. Do you ever run into pushback on that, either in bringing in a freelancer or in like internal meetings at various points?
So I mean, IGN itself did have like an individual category scores and then an overall score. But even in those cases, at least I'm not sure if it was always there, but most of the time that I saw it, it was it always had like not an average written next to the final score, because like it every time I've seen that tried, I've been doing this almost 20 years. Every time I've seen that tried, it fails, because those scores can force you to give a final score that you don't personally agree with, right? So you take something like, I don't know, say Minecraft. Like a lot of people don't like the look of Minecraft, but so you can say like what score would you give the graphics on Minecraft? And you give that like, oh, say it's like it's a 4. I don't like the graphics, but everything else about this game I love. I think it's a fantastic game. But if I have those like hard math equations in there, just like failing on one aspect of that scorecard brings down my recommendation, even though I want to give it the highest recommendation, because at the end of the day, I don't think that the graphics are as important as everything else. So it just doesn't really work that way. But yes, I certainly understand why people want that. And I understand that like they see like the way they were graded in school, and they see like, oh, I got X number of points taken off, or I started at 100 and I get X number of points taken off for every mistake I make. And that's just not how art criticism works. But I do, like there are all kinds of different scoring systems. I think the association with how people were graded in school is one of the biggest problems with a numerical system. But like at this point, IGN has been using a system similar to this for almost 25 years, and like the branding is so tightly associated with that. Like people see 9 out of 10 IGN, and they like, that's so recognizable, right? If we were to suddenly change to like letter grades or stars or something like that, it's a big change for an outlet with such a history to make. It's a lot to ask. So I don't foresee any big shifts away from a numerical score of some form for IGN happening anytime real soon.
One of the aspects of that is that you have different people reviewing different games, and as a result, they all can put their stamp on the IGN 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, masterpiece, what have you. And one of the things I've really enjoyed about IGN and other outlets that have done this is they'll have the reviewer on a podcast or show or video segment, and they'll discuss with other people that have played the game why they did and didn't make a choice for this. Has that been a conscious effort at any point in your time with the company? Did that happen organically? How does those conversations end up?
Just as far as getting people to discuss with others, the reviewers get to discuss with other people who played it?
Yeah, within the company, because when you have editor A and editor B who disagree on a score, but one of them reviewed it, one of them has their stamp on the game, whereas the other is their own source of adding a voice, but they don't associate the 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 part of it. Those conversations to me are the most exciting and interesting when I hear them discuss why and how they come to a conclusion on a score, even if they disagree with their peers. I've always enjoyed that type of content.
Yeah, I mean, debates about how good a game are always fun to have, and it's valuable to the audience, because they it's always good to have more than one perspective on something, especially when people disagree. Then you get to pick which one you think is right. It just increases the chances that you're going to hear somebody that agrees with you. And it's we always whenever we do it, we keep it good natured. We don't there's no. I always encourage people, just like don't say somebody is wrong about a game if they disagree with you on it, just because like they're not wrong, you're not wrong, you just have different opinions. Sure. So you're like, nobody's ever going to convince you that you are wrong to like something that you like. I don't think that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Sure. For decades of people yelling at me for liking something that they don't. We've done, we've deliberately brought up those topics for a while there. I was doing a series that you can still find on IGN and on YouTube called Review Discussions, where we had a panel come on and talk about what their favorite parts were, what their least favorite parts were, and just like whether they would have scored, or what score they would have given it, that kind of stuff. So I think the reason we ended up not doing those anymore was it's really hard to get in a timely way to get a whole panel of people to play all the way through a game like a reviewer has. That is like games take a long time to play, especially the some of the more interesting ones that people want to discuss. So if you're trying to get a bunch of people to play through The Witcher 3 and talk about it, like that's a big a big ask for everybody to do for every game. Also, like sometimes we don't get enough copies beforehand for people to get a head start on it. So by the time we're able to do those, conversations kind of moved on. Also, like the art of headline writing is like if you don't have a compelling headline for somebody to catch their attention and click on it and read or watch it or what have you, like they're just going to pass it by. So, and we did come up with some good headlines for those, talking about like is the combat in The Witcher the best action RPG combat or whatever, but that would end up kind of stepping on our features writers because they would also have similar ideas to write about, and we would kind of overlap. So it's like, let's maybe just let them do their thing.
It's funny you mentioned the discussions. That was quite literally what I was thinking of, particularly given the discussions of Arkham Knight. That was literally what was in my mind. So it's funny you brought that up. But it makes perfect sense why you would have to, perhaps steer away is not the right element, but timing and headlines do both play a big factor. And that leads me to another question. And how big is the impact of a timely review and review process, given that sometimes you have a lot of lead time with the game. Other times it comes out, kind of right in there at the deadline of when embargo lifts. And the timing of a review certainly must play a big role in being relevant to the audience, but also in generating traffic on a site where you must have an audience to view your content.
Well, they're one and the same, right? If you have a relevant review go up in a timely way, the audience clicks on it. If you are way behind the pack and everyone already knows how good this game is by the time your review comes out, then it's yesterday's news. It's not like a review. If you look at the Google Trends graph for, like, you can do this for any game game review, and just look at the amount of people searching for that content. It's a spike right around launch, and then it drops off heavily. And if you miss that spike, well, you still get some traffic out of it. It's oftentimes worth it to go back and get something, or to review something a little bit later. But if you don't get that spike, like that's the what's your your bread and butter, I guess.
When you are working with different companies that provide codes, is there ever discussion of, hey, ahead of time, hey, this one's coming in hot, or hey, we're going to give you a good amount of time on that? Most recently, my mind jumps to how early codes for Horizon went out, and reviewers were able to get a good amount of time on that kind of game, whereas other games come in far more close to an embargo lift.
Like Elden Ring, for example.
I was thinking that one too.
Yeah, like every time, basically. But there's precious little control we have over that. It's pretty much all in the hands of the developers and how they're feeling about their game. That's something that has majorly changed, since the magazine days too, because we didn't have 0-day patches back then.
Sure.
So developers would have to get their games into, much better shape, because the game that was on the disc is the game that you would play, or the game most people would play, not the patched version. Whereas today, nobody plays the version of a game that's on the disc. It's the patched version, unless, like, I don't even know if that will work anymore. certainly not on PC. Probably not on the for most games for console. Like, you could probably not even play them unless you connect to the internet and download a patch. I'm sure there.
Which sounds so blasphemous when you look at 20 years ago, but now it's like, what a silly thing to do to not hook up your console to the internet.
Yep. But so like the developers are kind of incentivized to wait until the last minute, because they can get in those last fixes, and they want reviewers to have the best possible experience. They don't want you to have to to hit a bunch of bugs that are going to make you like their game less. At the same time, having to play through a game at as fast as you possibly can is not an ideal way to do it either. But I don't think that they value that as they prioritize that as much as I would like. So yeah, it's basically a conversation with pretty much every review we do is like, how soon can we get this? Can we have it sooner?
Mm-hmm.
Because every day counts. Especially if you have anything else you want to get done during that period.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then the idea of not wanting your own staff to burn out, trying to play through some of these games that are 20, 30, 40 hours long, and at the same time hitting that window of relevancy. And it's got to be a double-edged sword all
Yeah, I mean,
around.
it's a a fine line to walk, and I personally err on the side of like, don't kill yourself to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
We want it done quickly, but like, get some sleep. Don't don't work all through the night on these things. Like, it's generally not worth it in the long run. Some people will do it despite my protests. I'm against my advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird thing with games because some people are so passionate about them that they've been looking forward to playing it forever, and they now have an excuse to play relentlessly and just power through as fast as they can. Play not around the clock, but every waking hour.
Trust me, I watched Miles and Ains and many other people in the gaming industry burn themselves out on games like Elden Ring. They had so much fun, but they put in 80, 90 hours when the game been out for 2 weeks. It was just nuts.
Yeah. And it's like, so you can tell people don't do that, but some of them will do it anyway, just because they really want to. And like, I have no way to prevent them from doing it because I don't live with them.
Gotcha. Has work from home changed that conversation in any way, shape, or form?
No, that's been pretty constant. I mean, most of the gameplay hours were done from home anyway, except for people that are like actually like capturing footage in the office. Although we do that from home now too. Just we move the equipment.
Gotcha. You mentioned 0-day patches, and that brings up the other element of reviewing games, in that oftentimes the game you have a review score on, a year later, it's not the same game. It has evolved. We have a lot of live service games, and I noticed a trend at one point, industry-wide and at IGN even, where you gave the 2021 review of Sea of Thieves or whatnot, to give a more updated element. What justifies updating a review or changing a score on a game in a world where you do have live service elements?
I mean, it is a sticky subject. For a long time, I was adamantly against doing any kind of update to it, just because, like, you for one thing, it creates the expectation that you'll do it for every game. You'll go back and revisit everything, but there's no way to even review a lot of the games that come out once, much less multiple times. There's just not enough time for that. It also, like, I haven't, and this actually did not come to pass. I haven't had this really happen, but I worried that it would incentivize developers who were upset about a score that they got to try and pressure us to re-review their game with a better score. I haven't had that actually come up, which was a relief. But it's like the ones that we do pick to do an updated review on are generally, like you said, the games that are dramatically different to the point where it would change our recommendation, and also where there's still a community interest in it, because again, you can re-review a bunch of little games that have had substantial changes, but if nobody's searching for them, then or if we're looking for conversation about it or opinion on it, then you're just kind of screaming into the void. So it's something that we do typically when it's a slow period, and when because that game's been there the whole time, but we've got kind of a slowdown in the larger games coming out, and when we have something we want to say about them.
Interesting. Does traffic or interest from the audience ever impact that?
Well, I mean, we don't, like I said, we don't want to spend all the time to re-review a game that nobody cares about.
Sure.
So yes, if we do take audience interest into account, like if a game is still being talked about a lot, if it has good YouTube numbers, if it looks good on Google Trends, if people read other articles we've written about it, then yeah, that will definitely influence our decision to put in the considerable resources that are required to re-review something.
Gotcha. Dan, one of your, or rather, I should say, your pinned tweet is one that I would have to think was born of frustration, but also repetition of having to repeat it. And it says, for any listener that is unaware, that you pledge to quit your job if anybody could offer a credible piece of evidence that IGN has ever accepted a bribe for a review, and that you plan on being at work the next day. Is that something that consistently seems to come up? I often see fanboyism's comment section say things like this review is paid off, that kind of thing. I have to imagine that for you to post something like that, you just got frustrated to hear over and over again.
Yeah, I mean it's something, it's a meme, right? It's like, oh, any review that, and it comes down to people not understanding the concept of opinion, where it's like, oh, anyone who liked a game I didn't like or disliked a game that I liked must be a liar. And why would they lie? Because somebody's paying them to. That's the only explanation that these people can think of. And yeah, so like a lot of them are just repeating it, like they don't really believe it, but they think it's a joke. But there's really no distinction between pretending to be an asshole on the internet for a joke and actually being an asshole on the internet. So there's that just gets repeated in every Reddit thread and what have you, and like a bunch of younger impressionable people or conspiratorially minded people see it so many times, they're like, well, if I see it all these times, it must be true. But you notice with all of those claims, nobody ever has a shred of evidence to back it up. It's just completely fabricated, just because they can't accept that somebody has a different opinion of a game than they do. So yeah, it's just kind of a challenge to these people. Like, hey, you think you can show, you think it's a fact that all these reviews are bought and paid for. Somebody offers some evidence, and nobody ever has. So obviously I still have my job.
Yeah, I was gonna say obviously so. And does it ever lead to internal conversations about like reviews skewing or trending a certain way, at least to remind and justify that, like, hey, like this game is great? Like when I see people talk about Sony's games being so highly reviewed, it's like, well, yeah, they're unanimously highly reviewed across the board at a number of sites, and I always chuckle when I see the suggestion that somehow people are paying for it. Does it ever lead to internal discussions about that?
I mean, we try and think of ways that like we can dissuade people of this notion. It's like, what kind of extra transparency can we give to just show that, yeah, we are just telling you what we think about these games, and we are not influenced by like our ad. Now, obviously we're an ad supported business, so that is a difficult perception to overcome in some cases, because some people just will not believe you when I tell them, like, I have nothing to do with the ad sales department. Like I don't even know the names of most of those people. Sure. We don't talk. Like if a negative review costs us ad revenue, I don't know how much is spent on an ad. I don't know what ads are going to be on what articles. I don't know any of this stuff. So even if I was like worried about it, I wouldn't know how, which I'm not. I wouldn't know how to avoid doing any of that, or how to avoid making them mad other than just giving everybody a positive review, which clearly we don't do. So I actually have a folder on my my hard drive of screenshots of a bunch of ads for things running next to negative reviews of them. Just because like people are like, oh, obviously you gave this a high score because there's a big ad right there. It's like, well, how about all these cases where we did the exact opposite?
Sure.
But yeah, it's something that we hear a lot, and something that we would love to be able to convince people is made up.
It's the age-old frustration of headlines sell papers, but also people need to hear the news, and they need to hear objective news and fair critiques, and it's feel like that's an ongoing trend, no matter the medium, magazine, print, newspapers, digital areas. It feels like that's a constant thing that people have to compete against.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, some people don't believe that other people can have a different opinion than they do, and if they do, then it must be, or if they say they do, then it must be a lie, and they must be paid liars. So you're never going to convince everybody.
Earlier, we talked about embargoes and kind of when games need to be relevant for the audience that's searching for them. Do you think more information should be made publicly available for when codes come in or when review copies come in for review?
I mean, sure, but like oftentimes they'll ask us not to. So like sometimes you'll see these days you'll see you can tweet a picture of the box, or they'll explicitly say like it's okay to do this. So
Sure.
so oftentimes you will see that happen, but I'd still say more often than not they ask us not to. And there are varying reasons for that. It's been baffling to me, but I've had enough conversations with PR people, just like, why do you do that? And sometimes it's like, well, sometimes they don't even know, but they've just been told to do that. Sometimes they are worried that like they don't have enough codes to go out to everybody at once in the first batch. They trickle out for some reason, which is also a weird thing. But so they don't want to be barraged by everybody else when they see IGN got a copy. Why didn't I get a copy? So a lot of it is just for their sanity. But I certainly prefer to be able to put up a post saying like, oh, here's when our God of War Ragnarok review will be out. Come check it out, because that we get to promote our content that way. That helps us. So when we can, we like to, but oftentimes they don't want us to.
Interesting. It makes more sense as you explained it. Like as you were explaining the logic there, it started to kind of click into why you would roll them out in stages, even though that can be frustrating at times, for different people, including content creators, I think, which I have a bias there. But I'm curious if content creators have influenced your profession and what it is you guys do on that sense, because I would argue that you guys are the more professional side of an enthusiast industry, whereas content creators can be in the professional side, but also very much in the hobby element of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would not say that content creators as a whole are not professional. There's a bunch of people that are very professional, and there are also a bunch of people who run their own outlets or small outlets that are very unprofessional, but that's just their style, and that's fine. So I don't like lay claim to like any kind of holier than thou, like our reviews are better than some YouTubers' reviews. Like some YouTubers do fantastic reviews. But how have influencers or content creators changed what we do? I wouldn't say they've really changed anything about reviews. I guess the one thing that comes up from time to time is I'll see like YouTubers streaming a game that I haven't gotten a copy of yet, and it's like that's aggravating. But they some of them have entered into agreements where they are not allowed to criticize it, so they got an early copy.
Sure. Which is, I think, a different thing than a review.
It is, yes. Yeah. But and a lot of them just don't do reviews. But it's kind of I don't want to say stealing our thunder, but it is moving up the date by which the relevancy question, right? So it's like if everyone's already seen like so much of this game, especially played by somebody who is entirely uncritical of it, they are less interested in seeing a review because the question of how good is this has been answered to some extent.
I suppose I have one final question before I open the door to anything that you'd like to offer outside of what we've asked, and it's a weighted one, I suppose, and that is, what makes a good review? I feel like it's such a big question.
Well, I mean, for me, it's just like the more opinion you can have in there, the better. I think what separates a review from other types of content is opinion. Like that's what you're here for. I don't want to see an instruction manual. I don't want to see just like a vague description of this game. I don't want to see like the back of the box description. Like I first and foremost, is this game good or not, and then why? One of the things I try and stamp out in reviews is like paragraphs of story synopsis and just like it has X number of maps, or it has just like listing features. And I recognize that the audience wants to know raw information about games, but I want that to be kind of coded in opinion. It's like, don't tell me there are 6 maps. Tell me there are 5 good maps and 3 bad ones. And like tell me why. Just use that as an introduction to your paragraph about like what makes a good map and why these are good and bad. Don't tell me that the main character is a journalist. Tell me he's a terrible journalist who's annoying to listen to, right?
I see what you mean.
The information comes through, but it does so in the context of supporting the opinion that you're putting out there.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. It's the idea of it being coded in opinion makes so much sense to me.
Right. It's like if you don't have an opinion about a feature, like why are you even bringing it up?
Yeah, that's a good point, because the role is not to be an instruction manual; it's to be critical. Right. Interesting.
I think there's actually like a moment I can pinpoint in my career where like a light bulb went off, and like I finally like understood like, oh, this is what the whole point of a review is. I was reviewing, I think, Supreme Commander for PC Gamer magazine, and I had turned in a draft to my editor, the review editor at PC Gamer at the time was Chuck Osborne, and the feedback he gave on me gave me on it was, well, you told me what it is, but you didn't tell me if it's any good. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what I'm here for.
And that's where it rolled over in your mind.
Yeah, that just kind of like clarified what I was supposed to be doing.
I can tell you that on a very amateur level, that's been my frustration at the various points in content creation where I've done reviews, whether it's written for an outlet or audio for XEP. It's been a consistent bumbling point for me, and so it makes so much more sense when you say it as simply as that, and sometimes it takes that little bit to just make it click,
Yeah, and that's a big element of a lot of the feedback that I like to give. I'm a pretty heavy editor, like a lot of, especially on on online where the pace is so much faster than it was in print. A lot of editors are have a pretty light touch, but I tend to like to give a lot of feedback, give a lot of edits, and have more of a collaborative process with writers. And it's something I I guess when I first started at IGN, there were some people that appreciated it more than others, but I think because some people were it's like, this is slowing me down. I just want to get this out the door as soon as I can and move on to the next thing. Why do I have to do multiple rounds on it? I'm like, well, where I come from, we would like nothing would go in the magazine without having like multiple people read it and give feedback. But there's not really time for that in online print journalism or online journalism because of the pace of things. But having at least one person go over as much stuff as you can do, I think really elevates the quality of it and irons out a lot of wrinkles before the public sees it and tells you did it wrong.
Gotcha. Well, Dan, I have to know, is there anything else that you would like to pass on to listeners about the review process, your work, IGN, anything of that nature?
I guess I'll just end with my personal little pet peeve about games writing is the overuse of the phrase "the game," or the 2 words "the game." Like there are certain contexts in which I tolerate the game, and that's like if you're saying I was playing Madden and we won the game. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. You're talking about a game that is not a synonym for or a stand-in for the title of the game that you're playing. Okay. But if you look at, and now that I'm telling you this, you probably won't be able to unsee it. But if you to open just like an average or just a random game review from from pretty much any site except IGN and do Control F the game. Sometimes some people are better about it than others, but sometimes you'll see it just lights up like a Christmas tree. Like you'll see the game's weapons, the game's characters, the game's blah blah blah. Like people just can't get through a sentence without doing it once or twice, and it's part of it just kind of drains the writing of any personality when it sounds just like what everybody else does. It makes it more repetitive. So if I can put out one request to all your listeners is when you're writing pretty much anything, just avoid saying the game at almost all costs. There's certain cases where you can't really get around it, but that's one of the first things I do when I get a draft in is look for the game, and if it has too many the games in it, I'll send it back and say, fix this. This is not going to work.
So it's I was thinking it was your phrase would have been "in my opinion," but the game sounds equally, if not more, egregious when you put it into that perspective. For sure,
it's just overused. Like I don't have a problem with in my opinion, aside from some people who think that you need to preface every opinion with "in my opinion," whereas I feel that in a review, which is by definition an opinion, it's implied that pretty much everything in there is your opinion.
Yeah. It's like, we know it's your opinion. You're the one talking. Yes. Well, Dan Stapleton, executive editor of IGN's reviews, I appreciate you so much for lending your time today, lending your insight today, and helping us kind of understand the process that you all go through at IGN. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.